I've just turned 30 years old in the last month, and while I've always had sort of a low-level existential dread, in the last 5 years it's been magnified tenfold. Here I am in the prime of my life, living in the ashes of my country. The economy and local jobs and work culture have all eroded away into overinflated worthlessness. My country's traditions are mocked and ridiculed. My culture and even my own race are now under attack and demonized. They lie about our history, they lie about our founding, they discredit any progress we've made in the last 200 years, and we live in a warped simulacrum of what the media should be.
Mr. President, what did you order?
Chocolate chip.
Mr. President, what is your message to Republicans who are prepared to block the January 6th commission?
Eat some chocolate chip.
All forms of escapism have been politicized. You can see this push really happening in 2016 because a lot of normies entered the political world at that time. The system pushed the orange man bad narrative into every sphere of society to ensure their victory, and when that didn't work, they doubled down for another 4 years. I used to know most players on every football team, and now I have zero interest in supporting an organization that clearly despises its core audience of blue-collar people. One of my favorite museums that I've visited a couple times over the years is the World War I Museum in Kansas City. And when you walk in that museum, it's a very somber environment. And there's a little theater room where they show you a brief overview and a quick history of the events that led up to World War I. It was disconcerting to see all the factors that went into that war, and how you could basically just swap out all the names for the groups and activists and parties and countries we have today, and everything would stay the same. For all our talk of modernity, our uniqueness as a nation, all of the bragging we never stopped doing about the first woman to do this or the first black to do that, we failed to realize how we've played right into the hands of those who tried to lead us down the same roads our ancestors went on. We're not the first people to be progressive. Does anyone remember Hannah Wright? She was a test pilot in the 30s and 40s, and the first woman to ever fly a helicopter or fly a jet or fly a rocket jet. And she achieved all these amazing things under the evil mid-century German rule. She received many medals for her time as a test pilot, including the Iron Cross. Or think about how International Women's Day was created by Soviet Russia in 1917, or the very liberal and progressive Constitution of Soviet Russia in 1936. And fair warning, as Isaac Ducher called it, a veil of liberal phrases and premises over the guillotine in the background. And the same goes for the Democrats of today. We are not the first to go down these progressive paths, and as Nietzsche pointed out, time seems to be a flat circle, where people live in the same cycles over and over in what he called eternal recurrence. And who can deny that at this point, after everything we've seen? A good way to think of it is like this. Life and death are like doors at opposite ends of a long hallway, and between those doors are an almost infinite amount of side doors any one of us are allowed to go in and explore. Eventually, everyone gets shuffled out that final door of death. And throughout history, we've documented which doors go to what rooms, and we've shown which ideologies and rooms to avoid. But if people simply start ignoring those notes and disregarding history, then we are doomed to go back into those rooms again. It's like we instinctively try to write down and keep track of the bad doors, but over 10 generations, it just doesn't stick, and people will end up repeating all the same mistakes that their ancestors did. I think the right is stuck in this delusion that we can wake up enough people to win an election and just make everything go back to normal. I mean, imagine still believing in elections in 2021. I mean, the toothpaste is out of the tube. The hard pill to swallow is that we're all in a fugue state where capitalism has dulled us and numbed us to what's happening around us. These big corporations are in coordination with the government to control us more and more and more, and we all just sit here with a blank look on our face and drool coming out of our mouths. Your daily work is meaningless, undignified. It's simply a monotonous job that a big corporation barely pays you to do. Then you go home and try to numb yourself through Netflix or sports or whatever your weapon of choice happens to be. The work is meant to be degrading to the mind and body. It's supposed to keep you physically and mentally exhausted, to be too tired and busy to go protest or care or fight back. You just want to go home and relax. But Netflix hates you. Amazon hates you. The NFL hates you. Gillette hates you. Coca-Cola hates you. And yet here we are completely intoxicated on and addicted to their services and unwilling to make the changes necessary to preserve our society. Unless the gas dries up and food disappears and we have a total collapse, the people will always be zombies to the system. You really think there's a civil war coming? America is drugged up, and I do mean literally drugged up, with no fight left in her or her people. Even Canada and the UK had anti-lockdown protests. Where was ours? The most I ever saw was some rednecks marching through a Walmart without masks on. There is no civil war coming. There's no cavalry. There's no single politician coming to save us. There's no winning the culture war. There's nothing. The time for all that stuff was a long time ago. There's only the realization that we are the weak men created by good times, that we live in the ashes of our civilization, and that as time goes on, we'll continue to be distracted with consumerism and identity and materialism, and less of philosophy and morality and nationalism. We'll just be left with the intentional state of confusion that they have us permanently in, where in just 15 years we've ended up in a country we don't recognize. The past is a foreign country we were all citizens in, and it's subtly been replaced with a different one we never asked for. Another phenomenon I've noticed is that part of the eternal cycle is that societies will flip from one extreme to the other. Reefer Madness portrayed weed as the most dangerous drug ever, even capable of turning black men into crazed rapists of our precious white women, while today it's portrayed as completely healthy and natural and clean, and even some miracle drug that can cure cancer. And they say all that after they take a bong rip so hard they have snot coming out of their eyeballs. Pit bulls were the most dangerous, vicious dogs ever, and now they're named Sprinkles and wouldn't hurt a fly. Gays were viewed as just as degenerate as bestiality or incest or pedophilia, and now they're a separate class of people who are so revered and loved and adored and protected in every level of our society from criticism or negative views. And so it is with politics. Bush was the worst president ever, gotta get someone else in there. And then Obama was the worst, gotta get someone else in there. And then Trump was the worst ever, gotta get someone else in there. Here in Kansas, our governor flips from Democrat to Republican every election cycle. We constantly just switch back and forth. You even see this in things right down to the American flag. It was a symbol of our country, and now it gives people anxiety to see that symbol of oppression. It always flips. It always changes over time. And give things enough time, and they eventually flip back to the way they were at the start. Netflix made great movies because it wasn't held down by the oppressive rules of the man in network television. Now it is the man, and it's created its own woke rules to oppress others with. This is the nature of things. It's the natural progression of humans. Bill Maher touched on this cycle of humanity in one of his New Rule segments. Now, while as of late Bill Maher has been almost spot on in all of his New Rule monologues, the one he did on Joe Biden was clearly a miss. And I won't play the whole thing here, nor will I rip Maher for his bizarre analysis of Biden's mental state, but I encourage you to watch it and wonder for yourself exactly what he was on about. But I will play this clip right here.
Well, tonight, I'd just like to say this, America. You're not that young anymore. Powdered wigs was a long time ago. It's time you grew up. It's time to stop doing stupid, teenage, immature things, and number one on that list is not getting the most fundamental trade-off in life. You're beautiful when you're young, wise when you're old. This is the only country in the world dumb enough not to get this most basic, intuitive, obvious, file it under duh concept. That if, as they say, you learn something new every day, it stands to reason someone who's logged 10,000 more days is going to be, in general, a little wiser. Life is a series of patterns. You don't see it at first, because it's not a pattern yet. But by the third time, yeah, okay, I get it now. Yes, societies need youthful energy and fresh eyes on problems, and it's true. It takes young people to start a revolution. But Biden is the right man for this moment precisely because he is old. Been there, done that. It's a virtue.
So when Obama and Biden took over the White House in the middle of the Great Recession, caused, of course, by big banks handing out repackaged subprime mortgages disguised as AAA rated to poor people, mostly minorities, sometimes without even doing a credit check or verifying incomes, it stands to reason that Biden, who obviously has seen and, more importantly, governed over the disaster and recovery of that period, and who actually was tasked by Obama himself to be in charge of the economic recovery of America in response to the housing market collapse, would be well equipped to handle the economic difficulties we see today after COVID. So now that he's older and even more wise and has seen the pattern, what does he do? He's trying to expand access to loans for lower income people, because if we learned anything from 2008 and 2009, it's that we need to lend to as many non-qualified people as possible for a healthy housing market, especially in the overinflated, volatile market we have now.
Been there, done that. It's a virtue.
Here's another example of Biden's wisdom. In 2009, Obama and Biden approved of the Cash for Clunkers program, or formerly known as the Car Allowance Rebate System, or CARS. It gave people $3,500 if they traded in their older car for something newer with better gas mileage. Better gas mileage was defined as a minimum of 1 to 4 miles more per gallon on the newer car than compared to the car they were trading in. We'd be stimulating the economy and helping to save the planet from those yucky carbon emissions. And yet, in hindsight, this program was a disaster. It stole sales from future months to create a momentary spike while the program was running. It mandated that any cars traded in were to have the engines purposefully disabled and seized and the car body to be destroyed. It took hundreds of thousands of working vehicles and destroyed them to justify the sale of newer ones that would have sold just a few months later anyways, while raising the price of a used car an average of $1,800. Its effect on the economy was non-existent, its effect on the environment was hardly life-changing, and we spent $3 billion of our own taxpayer money on it just to reduce new car spending by $5 billion. It wasn't a good program, but Joe Biden is thinking of doing a similar program under his own administration in coordination with Chuck Schumer on a program called Clean Cars for America. According to E&E News, Joe Biden wants millions of Americans to trade in their older, polluting cars for shiny new electric vehicles. Their strategy aims to make a significant dent in the greenhouse gas emissions from transportation, the largest source of carbon pollution in the United States. Yet it contains echoes of Cash for Clunkers, a 2009 stimulus program unveiled by the Obama administration that many experts across the political spectrum view as a failure. What Biden is proposing is nothing less than an entire retooling of the U.S. auto industry. Don't get me wrong, that's an enormously hard thing to do. There are tremendous challenges in making sure that transformation happens in a way that stimulates the economy and provides huge reductions in emissions. The plan states that a Biden administration would embrace a $400 billion proposal from Chuck Schumer to, quote, provide customers rebates to swap old, less efficient vehicles for those newer American vehicles built from the material and parts sourced in the United States. The Schumer proposal, dubbed Clean Cars for America, seeks to take more than 63 million gas-powered vehicles off the road over the next 10 years. But Bledsoe, the former climate advisor in the Clinton White House, said it's foolish to equate the Biden-Schumer plan with Cash for Clunkers. Comparing the two is like comparing a raisin to a watermelon. They're just completely different. The big difference is duration. Cash for Clunkers lasted only for 1 month, from July to August 2009, until funding dried up. The Schumer plan would have enough funding to last until 2030, according to background information provided by the New York Democrats' office. That entirely changes the opportunity to provide economic stimulus. You're not just incentivizing customers to do something they would a few months later. You're providing them with an entirely new set of choices for years. Another major difference is financial scope. While Cash for Clunkers was a $3 billion program, The price tag of the Schumer plan is $400 billion. You see, Biden has learned from that mistake and realized the solution is just to pump more money and time into it. Apparently, in all his time and accrued wisdom, he's never heard of the sunk cost fallacy. And maybe, just maybe, once we have a nation filled with electric vehicles, and a nation that can already barely meet its electrical needs, will have more success, just like the Cash for Clunkers program, which Obama called a success.
Been there, done that. It's a virtue.
But do you see my point? Time is a flat circle, and we're just cycling back around to the same ideas over and over. It's incredibly disappointing and honestly extremely frustrating to know the simple answers to these problems and have everyone just ignore them and go on doing it the retarded way instead. Our society circles the drain each day with the simple ability to plug the sink at any time. But as long as using that plug is labeled racist, homophobic, xenophobic, blah, 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 you know the ones, we'll never solve the problem. Anyways, that's all the time I have for today. If you like this video and type of content, consider giving this video a thumbs up or maybe subscribing, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.